Hola, bienvenidos nuevamente a todos a mi canal Spanish Blueprints. My name is Joshua, and in this video, I'm going to be explaining to you how you can discover what type of language learner that you are. In a previous video, I talked about 4 different types of language learners, and those were the visual learner, the auditory learner, the verbal learner, and then finally the kinesthetic learner. But then that just wasn't enough after a little bit of self-reflection, but I really wanted to, figure out what exactly is the best learning style for me. No te olvides, if you enjoy this video and you find value in it, please give it a thumbs up and share with your language learning friends. So I'm going to be using these 4 different types of language learners to be able to give me a nice guide of what type of language learner that I am, but then also helping me to answer that question of what is my best method of learning. So the answer to what is my best language learning method right now, I don't currently have one. I am still searching and trying to figure that out myself and trying to see, what is working and what's not working. There's so many different ways to learn a language, and I've been figuring out what are those different methods for the past, like 2.5 years since I first started to learn Spanish on my own outside of formal classes. And it's like every single year I learn another method or I learn various methods. And at first it was super rocky because I brought my language learning methods from college. And by that I mean I was studying a lot of vocab lists because that was something that I was very accustomed to doing when I was in college, trying to cram as much information in my brain as possible before an exam. And the big issue with that method is that I was carrying it everywhere. So I was trying to do that with watching a movie. If I was watching a movie, then I would try to memorize every single phrase and every single word and just try to cram it all into my brain just by watching it. And the same thing with listening to music. I tried to memorize all the lyrics just by listening to it over and over again as much as possible. So of course, that was very ineffective and it was not a good strategy whatsoever. But one good thing that I did do was I started to write down the advantages and the disadvantages of the different learning methods that I was doing. And I also encourage you to do the same because that really helps with the self-reflection process to really figure out and hone in on that particular study method that's going to be the best for you. So in addition to writing down some advantages and disadvantages, I think it's very important to try to figure out what type of person that you are as well, not just as a language learner. For example, I have always been a person who has loved to read. I remember always carrying a book with me if I was riding in a car with my parents or if I was going to one of my family members' house. I always brought a book with me. And that passion has not decreased at all. It has only increased. As my passion increased, my curiosity also increased. So I would also ask a whole bunch of questions. And if you ask one of my brothers, he would definitely tell you that I used to ask why all the time. From there, I started to realize, okay, I love to read. I like to ask a lot of questions. I'm very curious. I like a lot of details. I like to know as much detail as possible for in general, if I'm making a decision or if I'm, reading or trying to understand something. Do you see how this is tying to the different types of language learners yet? Then recently I realized that I was kind of doing the same thing in college. For example, I actually used to buy the textbooks for each of my classes and I used to read them a lot. Depending on who you are and what type of language learner that you are, you might like to read textbooks or you might not like to read them. For some of the students in my class, they did not like reading the textbooks, but they still did very well in the exams. Poor me was trying to read every detail in these textbooks and taking a whole bunch of notes, and I did a lot worse than them. So the point of me saying this is that I did not like just listening to the lecture that the professor gave, but I actually liked to read the text itself. Because at the time, number one, I love to read, so I wasn't going to skip out on a reading opportunity. And then number 2 is that it actually gave me a lot more detail for me to be able to comprehend what that professor was saying. So connecting this back to my Spanish studies, I am very much so a visual learner and then also a verbal learner as well. So when I'm reading a particular material, let's say about Spanish grammar, then in this case, I'm not going to listen to a podcast about the grammar because I can't really memorize that well if I'm listening to something. So instead of listening to that grammar rule, what really helps me to learn like Spanish grammar is actually writing down what the grammar rule is and then also writing down a lot of sentences so I can see that rule in context. So I never really understood audiobook listeners because I can't remember any details of a book if I'm just listening to it every single day. So I am quite jealous and impressed by all of you audiobook listeners. I need you to teach me your ways because I think it would be very beneficial for me to be able to start comprehending just by listening. So on the other hand, I like to read physical books. I always have. I don't like reading online. I try to stay away from that as much as possible. So I'm not exactly sure why, but for me, it's a lot simpler for me to just read a physical book, but then I'm also able to take a lot of notes. I can highlight, I can underline, and then I can also add sticky notes. Remember when I said that I love to read and that I love details? So this can actually bite me in the butt too, because then I'm going to want to understand every single word and every single phrase in that Spanish book. But of course, that is not a very effective way to learn because you're going to be stopping way too much, and I don't want to have to look up every single one that I come across that I don't know. So that's how I realized I had to kind of decrease that passion a little bit if I wanted to complete a Spanish book, and then kind of change up my reading strategies. So I wouldn't be trying to study and memorize every single new word I came across. But then funny enough, when it comes to music, I would say I am an auditory learner because I do not like doing written exercises when I'm trying to learn a Spanish song. I would rather listen to it 100 times before completing one written exercise. That was not the best method because I would be able to memorize a lot faster and a lot more songs if I were to actually start to, look at the lyrics at the very least. Because listening comprehension is very difficult, and many times I'm not able to understand, new accents and new words and colloquial phrases from different accents from different countries. I would say memorizing 70% of a song is like the max that I would be able to understand. I would have to go and search up the lyrics of that song so I can get up to 100%. I'm an auditory learner and a verbal learner with Spanish songs because I'm not just listening to them over and over again. I'm also singing them. I'm trying to mimic exactly what that singer is saying in that song, and trying to match their accent and trying to basically mimic the same exact flow of that artist in that song. So when it comes to songs, I'm always working on repetition and speaking out loud and listening at the same time. Almost forgot. So as a verbal learner, one thing that I love to do as a learning strategy for Spanish is I like to record myself. So whether that's audio or video, so I'm going to listen to that recording over and over again and try to figure out, what are the different ways that I can increase my pronunciation, increase my pacing, and just my overall pitch and things like that. But then I'll also write down the different words and phrases that I said wrong or some things that I want to say correctly. So I also did a 30-day record yourself challenge, and that's just where you just answer a question in your target language. In this case, I did Spanish. For 30 days straight, and I recorded myself, and you can also watch my progress with that. So just doing that challenge alone has helped me come to the conclusion now that how much more I am a verbal learner. Recently, I just realized how much of a kinesthetic learner that I am. One thing for sure, I love to have conversations with Spanish speakers. It has took a long time to get to where I am today, but that's one way that I really improve in my pronunciation and my listening comprehension is through having as many conversations as possible with native Spanish speakers. So I will try as much as possible to use my Spanish in the city where I live in. So we have a decent amount of Latino restaurants, so I always try to push my friends to go there when we go out to get something to eat so I can practice my Spanish. So that's just one avenue right there, but usually if I think someone speaks Spanish, then, I might just say, hola, ¿cómo estás? Or something like that and try to start a conversation. Or, if I'm at a store, then I'm going to speak Spanish to someone who's working at that store and just ask them a question about, let's say, how to find a particular product, even though I might know what it is, but just so I can have that interaction and do it completely in Spanish. Because I'm very interested in learning how to speak Spanish in different formal settings. Even today, for example, I went to a hair store and luckily there were some Spanish speakers there. Then I did my best to maintain a conversation with them and just ask them different questions about a particular product. Cuánto cuesta, how much does it cost, y cuál es la diferencia entre este producto y esto acá, como what is the difference between this product and this product, and just trying to keep it going. So that was really fun. And I would say also when I'm traveling too, I do the same exact thing. So I just try to put myself in situations where I'm always speaking Spanish and I'm always learning something new. So during my travels, like to Mexico and Dominican Republic, I like to have conversations with a lot of the locals there. So for example, when I went to Mexico and the Dominican Republic, I was not staying in my hotel whatsoever. I was walking around. I was trying to have conversations with the natives that were there, so I could, learn about the culture, learn about the history, and then also practice my Spanish as well. Now, this is the strange part, because you remember when I said that I don't like to listen to audiobooks, but when it comes to having a conversation with a native speaker, that is probably one of the best ways that I'm able to increase my pronunciation and being able to speak more like a native, but then also being able to memorize a story as well. I listen very intently to a native Spanish speaker, and I'm really trying to, memorize everything that they just said, so I can respond to them, and so I can keep that conversation going, ask follow-up questions and things like that. So I think that's a little strange, but for whatever reason, it works. In addition to those, I would say I also put myself in a lot of different uncomfortable situations so I could increase my vocabulary, because I had some questions about some money and about like charges and things like that to my card, and what I was able to do with my passport and things like that. And I try to do all that in Spanish. Or like when I was going to different malls, different centers, and then I would ask questions to salesmen and saleswomen at different doors that would sell cell phones. So I was talking about cell phone plans, and I never really talked about before in Spanish. I learned a lot that way through that exposure, just by listening very intently, but then also repeating after what they were saying to me. You can see I'm not just one type of language learner, but there is a variety of different ways that I like to study, and that has to do with my personality and my likes and dislikes. I would say too that this is constantly changing, so it's not always the same. So how I study right now and some of the methods that I use to learn Spanish has not been the same since I started 2 years ago. So all this self-reflection is going to help you be able to figure out, what type of language learner that you are, then also being able to answer that question, what is the best study method for me as a language learner? In this case, for me, I can't really answer that because, there's a variety of things that I like to do that I'm interested in. But at the very least, after doing all of this self-reflection, I do have a good idea of what is working for me and what is not working for me. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope this video has helped you to really open your mind to the different types of, study methods that there are, and that, you don't try to just do one method that it doesn't work, but you're going to figure out what is the best for you. Te veo en el próximo video. Adiós.